Conference provides an international forum for exchanging the knowledge in the field of robotics, renewable energy, mechatronics, and 5G communication. This conference provides a platform for the upcoming researcher in the field of electrical and electronics. Ladies and gentlemen, we are going to start for the third plenary session on wireless communication. We are obliged to have dynamic personality, Dr. Santosh Dhar Madam, Dean Faculty of Doctoral Studies and Research at Shri Vaishnav Vidyapeeth Vishwavidyalaya as chairperson for today's session. Dr. Santosh Dhar Madam has been engaged in teaching, research, corporate training, and consultancy for the last 42 years. She has widely published her work and has more than 370 publications to her credit. Her earlier assignments have been Professor Shri Vaishnav Institute of Management, Indore, Professor Amity Business School, Amity University, Greater Noida, Professor Institute of Management and Dean Research, J.K. Lakshmipat University, Jaipur, Senior Professor, Jaipuria Institute of Management, Jaipur, Professor, Institute of Management, Nirma University, Ahmedabad, and guest faculty at IIM Kolkata and MIC Ahmedabad. Many research scholars have been awarded PhD degree under her supervision. She has designed and conducted management development program for the executives of several business houses such as Grasim Industries, JK Tyre, Bridgestone, Hindustan Motors, ONGC, and GAIL. She has presented papers in several national, international conference and seminar and had the opportunity to visit Nepal, Maldives, Bangkok, China, South Korea, UAE, Myanmar, Poland, and United States in connection with the various professional and academic assignments. She is life member of Indian Society for Training and Development, National Human Resource Development Network, and Indian Society for the Technical Education. We welcome you, madam. We are also obliged to have another dynamic personality, Dr. Ashutosh Shukla, sir, Professor and Head of the Department of Chemistry, Shri Vaishnav Vidyapeeth Vishwavidyalaya, as co-chair for today's session. He is associated with Shri Vaishnav Group since 25 years. He has visited many foreign countries for the academic purpose and presented research paper in various national and international conferences abroad and India. He is life member of Indian Science Congress Association and Association of Chemistry Teacher. We welcome you, sir. So without taking your much time, I request chair and co-chair of our session to please welcome our keynote speaker, Dr. Sarath Kumar Patra, sir, Professor and Director, IIIT Vadodara, Dr. Devjani Mitra, Madam, Professor, IIT Dhanbad, and Dr. Jyoti Singh, Madam, Professor, MANIT Bhopal. AV team, please play welcome video. Now, let us have the pleasure of listening to the opening remark of Professor Dr. Santosh Dhar, Madam. Over to you, Madam.
Thank you, Naresh. Dr. Sharath Kumar Patra, Professor and Director, IIT Vadodara, Dr. Debajani Mitra, Professor, IIT Dhanbad, Dr. Jyoti Singhai, Professor, MANIT Bhopal. A warm welcome to the plenary session 3 of PRAGYATA 2022 International Conference on Innovative and Sustainable Developments in Electrical and Electronics Engineering. The session is on wireless communication. The developing next generation 5G wireless network is expected to support significantly large amount of mobile data traffic and huge number of wireless connections, achieve better cost and energy efficiency, as well as quality of service in terms of communication delay, reliability, and security. To this end, the 5G wireless network should exploit potential gains in different network dimensions, including super dense and heterogeneous development of cells and massive antenna arrays, that is, massive multiple input, multiple output technologies, and utilization of higher frequency, in particular millimeter wave frequency. The potentials of 5G heterogeneous wireless network, which incorporates massive multiple input, multiple output, and millimeter wave technologies has challenges associated with the design of 5G heterogeneous networks. The proliferation of wireless services emerging from use cases of fifth generation technology is posing challenges on cellular communication infrastructure. They demand to connect a massive number of devices with enhanced data rates. The massive multiple input, multiple output technology at millimeter wave in combination with hybrid recording emerges as a concrete tool to address the requirements of 5G network development. But massive MIMO systems consume significant power for network operations. Hence, to improve the energy efficiency, reducing the power consumption is mandatory. In the millimeter wave communication frequency band of 5G and forthcoming 6G, the numbers of wireless electronic devices will explosively grow. With the commitment of long-term carbon neutrality, it has become mandatory to meet the requirements of green and sustainable development for the upcoming 5G era. The potentials are huge, but with no less challenges. Today, we have experts with us, and I request them to share with us more about the innovative developments that are sustainable in wireless communication in 4G and 5G era. May I request our first speaker, Dr. Sharath, to address the audience. Dr. Sharath Kumar Patra.
Thank you, madam. Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. I will start with sharing my screen so that
Before I'm going to start this session, I'm just introducing the Dr. Sharath Kumar Patra, sir. So, Dr. Sharath Kumar Patra, sir, Professor and Director at Indian Institute of Information Technology, Vadodara. He received his PhD from University of Edinburgh, UK in 1998. His earlier assignment have been Professor NIT Rourkela and Senior Scientist DRDO. He is Senior Member of IEEE, Institution of Electronics and Telecommunication Engineers, Institution of Engineers, and CSI. He has chaired several scientific sessions at national, international conference and seminar. Many research scholars have been awarded PhD degree under his supervision. He has more than 150 publications to his credit. His research interests include wireless communication and signal processing. So I now request Professor Sharath Kumar Patra, sir, to deliver their keynote speech. Over to you, sir.
thank you. I'm sharing my screen. Let me know if it appears.
Sir, is there any technical issue?
Yeah, I'm using an Apple device and finding it a little difficult to share my screen.
Could you see the option share screen?
Yeah, I saw that, but then it's taking me to the security of the computer security to permit to share the screen.
You can allow it. You can allow the security to share.
That's what I'm trying to do.
Right.
In case I have a difficulty, I will move to my tab.
Okay.
That should be possible because I'm not finding the right option. Let me see. Security and privacy. See Zoom in this.
This is actually the first time somebody is using this Apple laptop in front of me, so I also do not know the option.
I've done it quite a few times.
Right.
I don't know why it's happening today. Share. Allow Zoom to share your screen. Open system and security and privacy document access. Security and privacy.
If you don't bother, Sarat sir, can we start with Dr. Devjani Mitra madam? And meanwhile, you could search the option.
I think it's done. I think it's done. Okay. I think there is a difficulty in doing it. Give me a minute. Can I move into my tab?
Sure, sure.
It will take me a minute. Let me join to the tab. What I would do is I will log out from this.
Right.
And
can we start with Dr. Devjani Mitra and then we can, meanwhile, you could log in?
do that, but then what happens is my talk is more fundamental than Professor Devjani's talk. So in that sense,
okay, sir. Okay, okay. We are waiting for you, right?
Give me a minute. I'm just quitting this.
Right. No issue.
I think Dr. Patra is having some problem. So can we move on to the next speaker? Because then we'll run short of time.
Okay, madam.
Yeah.
Okay. So now we have.
ऐसे ही हो गया है ना?
Okay, okay. So now we have among us Dr. Devjani Mitra Madam as a second speaker. Dr. Devjani Mitra Madam, professor at Indian Institute of Technology, Dhanbad. She has done her MTech from ISM Dhanbad in 1997 and received her PhD in electronics engineering from ISM Dhanbad in 2002. She has authored more than 100 international journal papers and many international conferences and guided various PhD and MTech projects. She has worked on various research and development projects such as implementation of spectrum sensing for cognitive radio, sponsored by UGC during 2013 to 2016, perception informed by navigation for search and rescue, sponsored by DRDO during 2018 to 2020, analysis of phonocardiogram signal for the classification of heart valve disease, sponsored by Department of Science and Technology during 2017 to 2019. She is a senior member of IEEE and Institution of Electronics and Telecommunication Engineers. She has chaired several scientific sessions at national and international conference and seminar. Her research interests include wireless communication, channel modeling, computational intelligence, cognitive radio, and machine learning. I now request Professor Dr. Devjani Mitra Madam to deliver their keynote speech. Over to Madam.
Thank you so much. So shall I share my screen?
Yeah, Madam.
Okay.
Yeah, this is visible.
I think the screen is already shared.
Yes, yes, this is visible.
Okay, so I think because we are short of time, so we'll quickly purposefully I have chosen this particular topic because when we are moving into wireless 5G, I think massive MIMO and millimeter wave channel is something that really is a great part of this particular communication mode that is going to soon start. So I'll not, I guess that most of the participants they are all research scholars and faculty members, young as well as at mid-level. So what the objective or the takeaway from this lecture would be to introduce you to the areas in which a lot of research challenges are there. So it could perhaps motivate a few of the scholars for taking up research in this direction. Okay, so okay, so the plan in 5G and beyond, is basically going to be a combination of, as our chairperson madam had just introduced, that is going to be a combination of both MIMO as well as a millimeter wave band. But there are two different aspects. One is the transmission technique. The other is basically a different frequency band in which the communication is going to happen. So basically the 5G mode started although it started early as 2010, so it's more than a decade that it has been introduced. The main urge, what a layman understands, is basically the voice quality of cell phone is basically improving. And other than that, there are basically two features that even the layman is able to associate. One is the data rate that we are able to achieve. Mostly the data rate of wireless LAN has also reached in the meanwhile the unprecedented levels of your hundreds, at least the range of Mbps. Okay, but the agenda is now that the most of our phones should now start working as our laptop so that we are able to do most of the processing. So the 5G wireless system, the latest trend in the 5G system is that it is moving in the channel model. Okay, the channel modeling or the channel that we are going to use is perhaps now getting a shift towards a much more higher frequency band. We call it basically the two bands are there. One is the sub-gigahertz band. The other one is mostly the frequency is much higher than the 6 gigahertz. It's going as high as 100 gigahertz. So now there is a trade-off involved over here. That if the frequency band is low, usually the coverage area is wider. So naturally we have the base station, so it's going to have a larger coverage area. Whereas higher bands, definitely they will have, when we go for higher band, definitely we all know, being communication engineers, that what improves is our bandwidth. And basically, when you have a larger bandwidth, or at higher frequencies, then naturally what you gain is the extremely high capacity in terms of capacity. So this is where what the current scenario is, that we are trying to move into the higher bands. For example, although we are there in the ISM band, but there is in fact the unlicensed 60 gigahertz band also, which is actually going to be making a shift from the 4G. Now, this is a famous equation of what we have the channel capacity. I think this is a Shannon's equation. We all know it's basically a log. I mean, the rate or the channel capacity per unit bandwidth is given as log 2 1 plus SNR. So there are two important parameters involved in our system. One is the power and the bandwidth, which basically decides the capacity. One way obviously is to increase the capacity. So either we increase the power, because if you increase the power, the SNR improves, or we increase the bandwidth. So there are just two ways in which we can actually have the increase of capacity. But what happens is that, of course, it is under the, it is assumed that we are heavily under the Shannon limit. You all have studied about in our digital communication about the basic Shannon limit. So as long as we are, just not crossing the Shannon's theoretical limits, we are able to achieve this particular exchange. Either we exchange power for bandwidth or bandwidth for power. So normally both you cannot have together. But most of the channel coding techniques that still are existing, they have already reached the zenith, and we have more or less reached the theoretical limits. So now the only way that we can now improve what way do we improve the capacity? We want to have a Gbps rate or still higher. We want to watch movies, downstream streaming videos when you move on a train, moving train at a very fast train. Okay, so how do you go about this? Obviously, we have to look for new technologies. So here, one way is that definitely what we do is of course, other than the sharing the same time frequency doses, we're using multi-user and multi-cellular system. There's the access part we are actually trying to change. So other than the access part, that we have to move towards new technologies, and definitely MIMO or the using of multiple antennas, either at the transmitter or at the receiver or at both, you can actually do. Now, the point to be noted over here, those who are not very familiar with MIMO, is that you are gaining this technology of MIMO is allowing us to increase the capacity without increasing power or bandwidth. But then it is a special type of signal processing that is happening, which is enabling us to do this. Now, another part of any MIMO system is that, or in fact, any wireless communication system will not progress if you do not have a proper channel estimation. So what do we mean by channel estimation? The channel estimation is normally with the help of pilots and with the pilot training and all. So the condition of the channel is made known to the receiver. So it is only with the help of that we actually try to decode the symbols. Not only that, the condition of the channel is also made known to the transmitter through what we call a feedback channel. The main essence is that the moment we go for a MIMO system, suppose we have a 4 transmit and 2 receive antenna system. So it is governed by the minimum number of antennas that is the highest number. Okay, the smallest number. So the smallest number is 2 and the highest number is 3 and 4. In any case, we are going to have at least double the capacity. If the transmit channel knowledge, if the transmitter is having the channel knowledge, then double the capacity can be obtained even at SNR as low as -5 dB. And in general, you can add to the capacity for every hertz of bandwidth about 1.5 BPS per hertz. So if you are having a 50 megahertz bandwidth, so 1.5 BPS multiplied by 50 megahertz. So that will be the total gain in the capacity. So this is basically broadly the summarizing what we call the basic technology of MIMO. Without increasing power or bandwidth, okay, we are able to get this enhanced capacity. Okay, so very much within the Shannon's capacity limit. Now, the problem with the current wireless communication generation is that we are scarce. We both power and bandwidth are scarce. So that is why MIMO has become a very, suitable technology, because this is one technology which is not requiring the increased power or bandwidth. Incidentally, we cannot have a higher power. The moment you have a higher power, we all know the health hazards associated with the higher mobile power. Already we are exposed to so much of electromagnetic hazards. And other than that, the hardware problem also starts cropping up. So there is a limit up to beyond which, because of the sensitivity of the receiver limitations, we cannot increase the power of the transmission. And so that means SNR, there is a limit to the SNR achievement that you can have. Similarly, at the same time, the wireless communication, because in earlier days when we had wireline communication, you could exchange one for the other. So either you could have a power efficient or a bandwidth efficient system. So you could actually just balance the design. But this is where what we have struck it, that we now need to be saving both. Okay, not only power, bandwidth. In addition, we have to make the system green. So this is another problem, that your frequency spectrum is also scarce. So this makes it difficult to increase the bandwidth. So this is where the new techniques has to be introduced, where the MIMO takes a very important role. We have what we call the area throughput system. Okay, the area throughput we mean, you can see this just simple expression I've just collected. This is a term that is actually relevant when we are actually judging how much of throughput that we require. So it's the bits per second per area that you are able to achieve. So there are three factors. You can see one is the bandwidth in hertz. D is the number of cells that you can accommodate within a unit area. And spectral efficiency is the number of bits per second per hertz per cell. So this is basically giving you how much of throughput you are able to achieve in a given area. So normally when we achieve, so this is the three approaches in which my 5G is actually developing. One is that you can increase the bandwidth. Okay, so suppose I need to within a given area, I need to increase the throughput 1,000 times. So maybe we could split it up into these three factors, 10 into 10 into 10. So you could expand the bandwidth 10 times. You could increase we have already the concept of what we call the femtocells, okay, the small cells or femtocells. So femtocells are going, you reduce the size of the cells so you can accommodate more number of cells per unit area. So the number of cells that you can accommodate, this is one aspect by which you can, if you're increasing this number of cells by going for smaller number of cells, definitely you are able to increase the overall throughput. Then the spectral efficiency. Now these are the aspects. So the spectral efficiency, MIMO is a technology that can address the spectral efficiency. Bandwidth, you can improve bandwidth the moment we go for millimeter wave. And when we go for small cells and increase the number of cells or reduce the size of cells, you can go for higher T. So this in fact is the approach that we try to use. So how do you go? The biggest question is, how do you go for higher bandwidth? If I want to go for high frequency bands, obviously millimeter wave means compared to our current 900 megahertz and all, we are going to the almost up to the above 10 gigahertz or above 1 gigahertz range that we are going. The moment we go for higher frequency, my wavelengths are smaller, but the biggest problem is that you suffer for the coverage, because higher frequency bands will not have a smaller coverage, distance will be less. But at the same time, what happens is that the throughput. So there is a trade-off between whether you want to go for slower data rate and whether you want to go for coverage. So there my small cells are playing a big role over here. So I was telling you the three approaches just now we were talking about, that you can have the densification, okay, that more number of cells per unit area, this is increasing the factor D. You could have increased bandwidth. This is where my millimeter wave is coming. Millimeter wave means definitely I'm making use of the higher frequency bands where you are having more bandwidth available. Almost 10 to 100 times more bandwidth is available over there. So that is going to give me increased B. And of course, I have to devise some technologies which gives me spectral efficiency. So your OFDM, MIMO. So these are the two very integrated technology that actually takes care of the spectral efficiency. So what is massive MIMO? Conventional MIMO has been in around most of our systems. It has been since a long time. But then what happens is your mostly massive MIMO. So what is massive MIMO? Massive MIMO, the word massive simply signifies that you have a large number of transmitting antennas and receivers. In place of let us say 4 or 5, you could simply go into tens and hundreds. Now the biggest advantage is that when I'm using both the two technologies together, that means I'm going to use massive MIMO in millimeter wave bands. The moment I actually marry of these two technologies together, we are trying to use this, then we see that there are two interesting properties that actually happen in the channel. This is known as the two important characteristics which we call as sparsity and low rank. Okay, because in MIMO, the channels can be normally designated as a matrix because there are many transmitting antennas and receiving antennas. So the issue of sparsity and the low rank that comes into picture. Now this is where this is going to be the talk of the basic, the broadly I'm going to introduce what is the problem, so that you actually, I just introduce you to the problem without going into much mathematics. Of course, it is a lot of mathematics, but then because it's only a half-an-hour seminar, so I'll try to avoid, but I'll broadly give you what is the idea behind, or what is the significance of where the sparsity and the low rank things come, because this is where what brings us new challenges. Okay, so just now let us have a quick, we all understand, okay, I mean, those of you are exposed to MIMO, that MIMO is very important. Why? MIMO is very important because there are basically two advantages of MIMO. One, it can term the multipath beneficial. Normally, we have been talking about in wireless communication, you have multipath fading channel. Now, this multipath fading channels is considered to be a disadvantage, to be a limitation of the wireless propagation. But incidentally, in your MIMO technology, we are trying to make this beneficial. So it's something like कि जो है दुख को जो है सुख में, we are changing the dukh to sukh. Okay, so what is bad for us is actually going to be good for us. Why? Now, because when you have a very rich scattering environment, then due to the multipath fading, what happens is that most of the paths are independent of each other. The moment you have independent of each other, so then you can actually make use of channel fading, because all the paths is not going to suffer from the same channel fading. So maybe one, because in MIMO I have got many paths. So if it is a 3x3 MIMO, 3x3 means 3 transmitting antenna and 3 receiving antenna. So basically there are 3x3, 9 paths, 9 channels through which your signal will be traveling. Now it is just possible that your signal will not fade in all the 9 channels. Out of the 9 channels, in one of the channels definitely is going to give you a good reception. So this is what we try to make use. So even if the condition is deep fade, we call it broadly. There are 2 aspects of MIMO. One is the diversity and the other is the spatial multiplexing. Once again, please note that we are not spending anything on power or bandwidth. It is only through some signal processing techniques of diversity and multiplexing, okay, that you can achieve. So in both ways we are using it. If the signal is deep fade, we try to take the diversity advantage. If it is not in fade, we try to take the advantage of multiplexing. The spatial multiplexing gives me an increased capacity, and diversity improves the quality. So we say that it is making my system more reliable, and it is also able to do what we call increased capacity. Both you cannot get. Once again, there is a fundamental trade-off between the two. So either you get this or you get this. So if you want diversity, you will not get capacity multiplication. Okay, so this is the basic theory of MIMO. So large array gain means a large number of antennas. These days the antenna technology has also improved so that arrays can be actually realized very efficiently. So these 2 concepts you can actually, those of you are studying MIMO, you know very well how the technology works. So just broadly, you will find that there are 2 aspects, MIMO with diversity. It's called diversity and multiplexing. So single user system is having T number of transmitting antenna and R number of receiving antenna. So you can see in this curve, the spectral efficiency, this is a plot of efficiency versus SNR. Okay, so with increasing SNR, definitely the spectral efficiency will increase. But look at the exponential increase, the linear increase that you have with the capacity when you go on increasing the number of antennas, number of M cross M MIMO system. Okay, so M equal to 1, M equal to 4, 8, 16. You can see for the same SNR, you get much more higher spectral efficiency. Now, diversity scheme is that you have a bit stream 101. So in diversity scheme, the same stream is transmitted through all the 3 antennas. Whereas in multiplexing, you split the 101 into 3 parts. So the first bit is going to be carried by one antenna, the second bit is going to be carried by another antenna, and third bit by the another. This is principally the difference between the 2 broad schemes of MIMO. One is the diversity scheme, the other one is the spatial multiplexing scheme. Okay, one is improving the reliability and other is improving the capacity. So if you see, if you have a 3x3 MIMO, so my channel matrix, we have something called H is known as the channel matrix. So this channel matrix basically has to be, this is going to be a matrix whose number of elements will be the number of paths. So this is the first transmitting antenna, first receiving antenna. So on the transmitter side, 1, 1, 2, 1, 2, you have NR cross NT, so many number of channel matrix. So in massive MIMO, what happens is that you have a large number of antennas. So this channel matrix becomes very, very large. And in fact, the main power, that is please note that the total number of, this is now 1 to NT. So the total power will be divided, signal power is going to be divided. Suppose there are NT number of antennas, so it is going to be unit power agar hai, just as a convenience, I have taken 1 unit power. So this is the broadly the mathematical expressions governing the broadly the MIMO. Once again, I'm leaving the signal processing that happens, that actually gives you the multiplexing. But this is basically the theory of MIMO, or the only problem is that when my massive MIMO becomes massive MIMO, large number of NT and NR number of antennas happen. So this channel matrix becomes a huge dimensional matrix. So then the analysis and those things becomes intractable. So because working with matrices, it becomes difficult. So there are, even if you do simulation analysis, that also requires too large simulation time. So this is where a lot of things have actually happened. So one important aspect that is normally done, I think those of you might have studied this, we have already studied in our mathematics classes, something called eigenvalues and eigenvectors. So singular value is similar to your eigenvalue and eigenvectors. Eigenvalue is for a square matrix, whereas your singular value decomposition is similar to your eigenvalue decomposition. So what is done is that the channel matrix is basically factorized into 3 matrices. So it is basically factored into the product of a single, this is a channel matrix suppose. So what we do is we make the singular value decomposition, okay, and this is factorized into 3 matrices. So these matrices, you can see these are all unit vectors. They are orthogonal to each other. Each of the columns, their magnitude is unity and they are orthogonal to each other. So these are 2 special vectors which carry the directions. Okay, so we can just we can later on study the, as a mathematical, those who are interested, you can go into the mathematical theory of SVD. Now, what is interesting is that you get a central matrix. Here you will find it's a diagonal matrix which is having only 3 values. So if it's a 3 cross 3 matrix, you will get 3 singular values. They are called the singular values. Please note that the singular values is in descending order. So the first one is the highest, the second one is the next, and the third one. So this is sigma 1, sigma 2, and sigma 3. So what is the physically, once again, I'm omitting some of the intermediate mathematical steps, but this matrix is called U matrix, the first one. This is called the singular value matrix, and the third one is called the V matrix. So now please, this is a very important phenomenon that happens in MIMO system. We call it the pre-coding. So what happens is that the knowledge of these U, V, because the channel is, by channel estimation, the channel is known at the receiver. Then at the receiver, the SVD is done. And once the SVD is done, these matrices are made known to the transmitter. So what the transmitter does is, you can see, transmitter is something like, see, you are traveling to a new place. You want to travel to a new place. So normally what do? You try to make some homework and try to find out what are normally the problems. If you are trying to come from, let us say, from Hyderabad to, you're trying to come to Dhanbad. So definitely you'll find out, okay, if I go from Hyderabad to Dhanbad, I'll have to take a flight up to Kolkata, then I'll take a cab or a train. So you say, okay, this problem could come. So what do? You normally ask a person who has already traveled. So a person who has already traveled will actually be telling you, okay, see, this is the situation. Please do. So you are knowing beforehand, before traveling, you know the condition of the channel. So something similar happens in the case of my mind. So before the transmission occurs, the matrix, you can see that this is my transmitter side and this is my receiver side. Okay, this Y is my receiver side. So what this U and V matrices which you get by decomposition of these 3, you actually get, we do the pre-coding over here. This is called the pre-coding. So what is done is that it is done so that you already take the corrective measure. So if you know that there is a big pothole in between, so you will always, while driving, you will just turn your car to the right because you already know that there is going to be a pothole. So something like that, that corrective action is possible when you take the singular value decomposition. Now this is where, when you actually take the singular value decomposition, if the channel, what happens is that we told that, let us come to the next one. So this is just summary of the, what we call the MIMO system. Most of the MIMO systems, this is the mathematical background behind the pre-coding that happens. Pre-coding happens, this is the pre-coding, and this is the opposite of pre-coding, we call it receiver shaping. And see that uses the matrix UV. H is the original channel matrix, and this is the first matrix is the U, this one is the V. So using this, they do this. So you can see this is a 3 cross 3. This was a complex channel. So you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There are nine actually paths. But when you do it, you actually equivalently you break it into 3 independent parallel paths. So this is the advantage that you can have a linearly independent 3 paths. It is just like as if the 3 transmitters and antennas are transmitting independently of each other. So this is the biggest, the signal processing that happens in a MIMO system, which gives us the advantage. Now, this is a matrix, the sigma. Sigma is the matrix, central matrix. Okay. So now, as you saw that these singular values, the last value is usually much smaller than this value. So suppose it is a massive MIMO, what happens is that suppose it's a 100 cross 100 MIMO. So naturally you will have a diagonal matrix having 100 entries. Now usually they are all in descending order. So it could be possible that, so you will have 100 singular values because it's a 3 cross 3 matrix. You have 3 singular values. Now because of that, what will happen is that there are several singular values could be very, very small, too small to be ignored. So suppose you just ignore some of the singular values, then what will happen is that the moment you ignore these singular values, the rank of the matrices will actually reduce. So that means it signifies that all the rows and columns of the matrix are not independent of each other. That means there is correlation amongst the rows and columns of the matrix. The moment there are rows and column independence, I think we all know from matrix theory from our school days, the rank of the matrix is not, it's not a full rank matrix. So even if it is a 3 cross 3 matrix, if you do the singular value decomposition and make that study, you could find that the rank is reduced from 3 to 2. So that is where the concept of the rank of channel matrix and the condition of a channel matrix comes. The condition is basically the ratio of the maximum singular value to the minimum singular value. For example, 1.4 by 0.3359. This ratio, sometimes this ratio basically tells you about the quality of the channel. Now, this is where a lot of research has to be done, because when you know the quality of the channel, this is actually going to help us in improving our channel estimation, and a lot of pre-coding and many advantages of the MIMO system will come when you actually know the rank of the channel matrix. Okay. So this is what happens in your massive MIMO. Massive MIMO is same as normal MIMO. Only thing is that you have a large number of base station antenna. It's not about size, it's just large number. Okay, now implementing hundreds of antenna means what? It will actually imply a very huge physical size. Okay, but this is one of the problems. This is where if I go for millimeter wave band, what happens? Millimeter wave band means frequency is high, means my wavelength will be low. If my wavelength is low, my physical dimension of the antenna gets very small. This is where the advantage is having. Okay, I was telling you about correlation amongst the different elements of the channel matrix. This is very important. Ideally, we would like to have independent channel matrices, all the rows and columns, because then only you are going to get the advantage of spatial multiplexing. But theoretically, what happens is that it may not happen. Okay, so a lot of signal processing takes place for doing this pre-coding and getting the advantages of diversity and multiplexing. Okay, now there are large. Now I've just written some of the advantages in the last bullet. Some of the advantages that you get of massive MIMO, so that you realize how important it is. Reduce latency. Latency means the delay time that happens between transmitting and receiving. So reduce latency, spectral efficiency, the MAC layer becomes simplifying. As a power is a big issue. Okay, because these days we are using what we call, we are also going for green communication, and then self-sustainable nodes are there, low power IoT nodes are there. So we cannot afford to spend a lot on power. So overall, the massive MIMO helps us to achieve all these things. Now, next comes, as I was telling you, the parallel technology that is very much getting coupled to this, especially in the last few decades, last 5 or 6 years. It is the millimeter wave. What is millimeter wave? Millimeter wave is simply another higher band of frequencies. I told you beyond 6 gigahertz or 5 gigahertz, we start calling them. It's actually between 3 to 30 gigahertz, okay, or 300 gigahertz, it may go in that range. So here also there is another, when we go for millimeter wave, once again, you have a lot of advantages. You can have high data rate communication. You know, these days autonomous vehicles, the technology is another technology, you know, where millimeter wave is actually is in a big way, it is playing a big role. Okay, we are able to most of our autonomous vehicle systems, they rely on the millimeter wave frequency transmission. Once again, you do have, because of the higher frequency range and bandwidth, you definitely have the advantage of high data rate and latency. As I was telling you, most of your IoT is another application which is strongly going to use the millimeter wave. So one thing, that millimeter wave mobile communication 4G can be effective only, but the only problem with millimeter wave is that the coverage range is very poor. Coverage range, the channel properties is not very good. So what happens is that coverage, it becomes reduced. So naturally, for what to do about the coverage, you have to use directional antennas, just like a laser beam. It is going to create a beam kind of thing. So that is going to be directional wise. So it's not going to be dissipated. Okay, so that is wrong. Definitely millimeter wave has to work with beamforming. So you have digital beamforming, analog beamforming, hybrid beamforming. Then A to D, ADC ka issues It's a big issue that comes. That's another problem. So moment, see, any technology comes, there are some, good things about it, but then some challenges which have to be overcome. So millimeter wave is definitely a big boon for using. These days, what we are trying to use is that we are trying to use smaller base stations. I was telling you, accommodating more number of cells in a given area. And then, so even the fiber optic links, you can replace the fiber optic links with a wireless millimeter wave link, because wireless is always advantageous over fiber optic. So when we are trying to, so for example, this figure will help you to understand how the millimeter wave is coming. So can you see this green one? This is my base station, and this green one is my normal 4G. Okay. But what happens is that instead of the base station connecting directly to the 4G, so this is a big cell. And you see this big gray one is the big cell where you have in the center, you have a big station. So now we are moving for what we call the femtocell or picocell, femtocell. So we introduce large number of smaller cells, each having their own access point. And this now, the base station is now connected to this. This is called the backhaul network. So this backhaul network is going to be a millimeter wave. So you can earlier, this was mostly, so we can straight away this quality of transmission and overall the number of users that can be accommodated and the throughput rate is going to be increasing. Because see, you are basically increasing the number of cells per unit area. Okay. So just moment by shifting from the conventional sub-gigahertz channel to above gigahertz channel, okay, you can get. So these are the millimeter wave small cell technology which are actually coming up the big way. You can see the current bands of the millimeter wave. So you have 28 to these bands, most of the studies are happening in 28 to 38 gigahertz. 28, 38 gigahertz has got a bandwidth of 500 megahertz. Please look at the difference in the bandwidth. See, normal, our mobile bands, sub gigahertz, 4G and all, you can get only up to 50 megahertz of bandwidth. But here you are getting, in the first band, you are getting 500 megahertz, 57 to 64 gigahertz the band may, you are getting 2 gigahertz, the 70 to 90, you are getting 4 gigahertz. So you can see the tremendous amount of increase in the bandwidth. Okay, but as I told you, nothing comes for free. You have new benefits, but then you have new problems to face. The large bandwidth, naturally your channel becomes more. I think those of you who have studied wireless communication, you know the problem of ISI and frequency selectivity, okay, fading. So this, once again, large bandwidth means that problem again increases. Okay. So limitations of the millimeter wave band, mainly is that the moment you are shifting towards millimeter wave, a major complexity that happens is in the increase, because you're going to go on a higher frequency.
Excuse me, ma'am.
Yes, please.
We actually have 2 more speakers still
Okay,
remaining.
I'll wrap up in 5 minutes. Okay. So the limitations also you have, I was telling you, ADC, DAC problems, the channel models are there. And another big problem is that it is too much dependent on the atmospheric absorption. Okay, so signal even in rainfall and all, it starts. Okay, now this is where my MIMO can help. Okay, so if you combine the millimeter wave with massive MIMO, then what happens is that they complement each other, and most of them, they overcome the drawback of each other. So massive MIMO ka jo bhi problem hai, it is contained by this millimeter wave, because millimeter wave is working at high frequency, so the dimension is reduced, so the space problem becomes solved. And it is something like a very good marriage partner between millimeter wave and massive MIMO. So both can complement each other in most of the disadvantages. Now here, the new era, as I was telling you, it is the combination of millimeter wave and massive MIMO. Okay, so you can use for long transmission point to point, and then at the same time you get high bandwidth, high throughput, and at the same time you get small antenna size. And the biggest advantage is that you can, when you are using antenna arrays, these days the antenna technology has got beamforming, and due to beamforming, you are able to once again overcome the limitations of the millimeter wave. Okay. Now we'll just quickly talk about the main 2 problems that we were talking about. That the channel matrix that we were talking about, it is a main problem is that.
Sorry, madam, sorry for the interruption. Can you please conclude?
Yes, this is the last slide. Slide. Okay. So this is you have the sparsity of the channel matrix is one thing, and we were talking about the low rank. Okay. So one important property is the sparsity. Basically, sparsity means that you have the channel impulse response which are having a lot of zeros in between. So something like this, it looks something like this. So this is my sparse channel. So the impulse response are there, but you do not have any impulses in between. So this is typically the characteristics of a millimeter wave channel. Now what happens is that using this sparse channel, when you are actually doing the channel estimation, so what happens is that you have very much low rank systems. Okay, so these are the broadly the two research challenges that as I talked about the singular value decomposition, then it has very low rank. Okay, so this is the summary of the overall I mean the broad area whenever I'm trying to. This is my last slide. So just to conclude, we have talked about what is millimeter wave and massive MIMO and what advantages you have when you combine the two. The main advantage or the research area that happens, there are two research challenges. What happens is that because of the low rank and the structural sparsity that happens in millimeter wave, you need to exploit them. Using them, you are able to get very good channel estimation techniques. So there are broadly two research challenges. Due to the high variability, the short training periods are there. That means the time you take for training, you use pilots training. So that takes a lot of time. Okay, and of course, the large antenna size requires large number of training. So most of the researches that is happening is trying to overcome these two. And how can we overcome these two? We can overcome these two by exploiting the channel sparsity when we are doing the beamforming and the low rank property in the angular domain. So these two topics are actually very important. The moment you enter massive MIMO and millimeter wave, you have to address these two. Using these, there are definitely mathematical topics, but then once you are able to exploit them, understand the structure, then only you are able to solve the broad two research challenges. Okay, so this is all from my side. This is just in half an hour, I tried my best to actually just expose you to the overall problem.
Okay, thank you so much for your words of wisdom. It will be great pleasure for us listen to you again. I request the participant to post their question in the chat box.
Naresh, you can chat box. We can have those questions later, but first let us finish with the speakers.
Okay, madam. So we already running short of time. So now I request Professor Patra sir, please start your session.
Hi, I think you can hear me now.
Yes, sir.
Let me start the presentation. Technology is really causing difficulty. Okay, let me share the screen. Start now.
Yes, sir. Your screen is visible.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. I, in fact, looked at a very simple part where I could introduce the topic on 5G with its new technologies and what sort of features it is able to give, it will be able to give us, including why is it that the earlier technologies are unable to provide us something that we are looking at today, and how does the world or how has the world changed with this? Now, that's my brief outline. Now, looking at the world with numbers related to telephone users, in fact, we have reached a point where the number of users are massive. India has about 1.2 billion mobile users, and the world has about 8 billion mobile users today. Now, you can see the graph, how it has grown and how
So, I hope we cannot listen you actually.
So you are not audible actually.
Still, you are not audible. You can please exit from this presentation and you can resume once again so that I hope it starts. Cannot listen you, sir. We see you speaking something, but it's not audible.
We are not able to hear anything.
Please unmute yourself, sir.
It's not really muted actually.
Naresh, can you talk to sir on phone and tell him that he's not audible?
Okay, okay, ma'am. Just I'm going to communicate.
Not able to connect with Dr. Patra also. So, when can we start with our third speaker? Ma'am, can we start with our third speaker because we are not able to.
Yes, meanwhile, you can request sir that till his thing is solved, we can hold for the speaker, next speaker, because it's already 3.
Right.
Hello, Naresh sir.
Yes, madam.
Sir, is there any again connectivity issues with Sharad Putra sir?
We can't speak with the sir. There is issue.
Can we start with the next speaker, Jyoti ma'am?
Definitely. So we also have among us Dr. Jyoti Singh madam as third speaker. Dr. Jyoti Singh madam, professor at MINIT Bhopal. She is associated with MINIT Bhopal since 28 years. She is Dean Faculty Welfare of MINIT since September 2020. She received her PhD in Electronics Engineering from MINIT Bhopal in 1991. She has authored more than 70 international journal papers and many international conferences. 14 research scholars have been awarded PhD degree under her supervision. She has worked on various research and development projects such as application of image processing in emerging GIS and remote sensing, sponsored by MHRD during 2000 to 2002. Modernization and automation of PCB lab, sponsored by MHRD during 2003 to 5. Psychoacoustic model based audio data compression technique, sponsored by AICT during 2008 to 11. She is senior member of IEEE, Institution of Electronics and Telecommunication Engineers, and CSI. She has chaired several scientific sessions at national and international conference and seminar. Her research interests include audio, video, image processing, and signal processing. I now request Professor Dr. Jyoti Singhe, Madam, to deliver their keynote speech. Over to you, Madam. Screen is visible, Madam.
Am I audible?
Yeah,
Yes.
you're audible.
Good afternoon to all of you.
Good afternoon.
I'm not getting any response.
Yeah,
Am
good
I audible?
afternoon. Yeah,
Yeah.
you're
yeah.
audible.
You are audible. Please
Okay,
carry
thank
on.
you. Thank you so much. So just I logged in few minutes before and I heard the lecture of Dr. Mitra. And yes, it's the generation of 5G. But what I am going to discuss today is how this journey has begun and how far we have reached. Let us appreciate this journey when the challenge was that without a wire, you are transmitting a signal so securely that nobody other is able to hear it. In a room where there are many users, but when a particular subscriber is called, only his or her phone is responding. Only he or she is able to receive the signal. While they all are in the same domain or the same area of the signal. That was the biggest challenge. Security is another challenge. Size of the instrument, strength of the power should not be so high that it can hazard the human or the living beings. Still, you are able to recognize the signal so precisely and clearly. So all these challenges are addressed during this journey of 40 years. As you can see in this plot, in 1980, the number of subscribers that were using mobile phone were less than 2 million. And in 2020, it has increased to more than 9,000 million. So the challenge was the type of communication, challenge was the type of instrument, challenge was security, but at the same time, the challenge is to accommodate so many users. That means this technology has become a very successful mobile communication is an application for the mankind. We are using it for our benefit, for our convenience. But this application of convenience or service has become so popular that the number of subscribers has increased exponentially to a great number. I remember when I was a child, some family members who were in USA, they used to come and tell that in USA, even the helpers they come to their house with cars. They all have telephones. And at that time, we do not have phones in our houses. Many of you must have remembered if you are having a phone in your house, landline phone in your house, it is considered as a very luxury. But now, in a single house, there are more than one mobile phone. Even a single person uses more than one mobile phone. This service has even break the barrier of economic class. Now, each and every person, whether they live in a villa or they live in a very low income group housing colony, everyone is having a mobile phone. Even a vegetable seller is having a mobile phone, or a bus driver is having a mobile phone, or an officer is having a mobile phone. So this service has brought an evolution to the communication for the mankind. Another challenge was the size. The first wireless mobile communication that was used in 1924 was put in a vehicle. Then it was transferred from one place to another. But now we are having mobile phones which are so handy. Initially, the mobile phones were only using keypads to communicate to the only for the voice communication signal, you can only enter the numbers or some text. But now mobile phones are using so many applications, from videos to games to surfing to email. Every facility that is possible can be used by a mobile phone. So look at the journey from where we started and where we have been, and still it is not the end. We are continuously going ahead and ahead. So in first generation of a mobile phone, which is known as AMPS, Advanced Mobile Phone System, it was developed by AT&T Labs, and that used the concept of cellular system. You all must be knowing why we divide the geographical area into cells, so that the signals, more number of subscriber can be scattered and the frequencies you use can be possible. So the first generation AMPS system used analog FM modulation system with FSK as multiple access techniques. This mobile stations uses only up to 4 watts of signal. That is why the size of the mobile systems were too large. And the coverage area that base station can cover uses 1000 watts with a frequency band of 824 megahertz to 849 megahertz. And data rate is also very low, only 2.4 kbps. This AMPS system, or the first generation, was only for communication of voice signal from one subscriber to another subscriber. But it was still a great revolution, because in those days it is itself is a great achievement that you are able to communicate without a wire to a longer distance. The subscriber that can use this facility was only 1 million, because of the limitation of the spectrum, limitation of the frequency bands that are available. Then in the first generation, the cellulars were using BTS, or the base station, to which a subscriber is connected. And when a request is sent by a subscriber, base station allocates a voice channel to the subscriber, which is then connected to the called subscriber base station, and the communication between the two exists. Always remember, whenever a new technology comes, old doesn't obsolete. New technology has to cater the previous generation and should be able to communicate or respond to the coming generation. If you remember, in black and white TV, when the black and white TV system came, it was a great revolution. But when color TV system came, all the black and white receivers or the movies were not thrown out. Even the color system TV receivers were such that they accept the black and white movies, they can play the black and white movies, and when the colored movies are there, they are also able to display those colored movies. So it is always necessary for any technology which is for the service of the mankind, that previous generations are not obsolete immediately. After an interval of time, when all the users who have now latest technology, then the old one can be obsolete. So this change is a very gradual change. So with the increase in the number of subscribers, with the acceptability of this new technology of communication from one subscriber to other subscriber without any wired line, this success motivated the second generation, and the second generation architecture consists of 3 layers. First is radio subsystem, second is NSS, that is network subsystem, and the third is OSS, that is operational subsystem. So this RSS, that is the radio system, consists of two layers. MSS, that is the mobile head, and BSS, that is the base station. This two, if we compare it with the now generations which are using terms now, then they are the radio network and the core network. So this is the radio, BSS and MSS is the radio access network, whereas MSS is the core network. RSS, which consists of MSS, that is the mobile equipment and the SIM. Mobile equipment is the hardware part of the system at the receiver or the subscriber end. SIM is the software part of the mobile equipment, which includes all the instructions that are given by the service provider for the operation of the system. So mobile equipment you can get anywhere from any shop. It is still the same system, but the SIM is provided by the service provider because it is having all the embedded information of the sub-service provider. In second generation, this mobile station gets connection with the BTS, and then BTS is connected to the BSC. One cell contains one BTS, but one BSC may contain many BTS. Similarly, many BSCs are then connected to MSCs, mobile switching centers, and these mobile switching centers are then connected to various entities and various types of other networks. Now, what these entities are, to which this NSS is there. Can anyone please let me know why these entities are needed? Any of the participants? This will help me to decide how much detail I have to go.
Yeah, participant, they can ask questions, or they can ask, they can put their questions in the chat box. Madam, no more question in the chat box.
Okay, thank you. So these different entities are there to satisfy the challenges which I have asked in the beginning, that how a signal which is received in a given zone or a given area is received by the desired subscriber only, why not to the other? Second question was, when the subscriber is continuously mobile, is you are continuously you are communicating even while moving. That is the mobile communication. So when you are moving from one place to other or one city to other city, still your location is identified by the base station. This called your base station knows that you may be in the morning in one area of your city, and in the evening you may be in the different city. So the mobile station knows that this number or this subscriber is presently located at which location. So identification of the location, identification of the subscriber, and at the same time maintaining the account, because without finance, without economy, no system is working. It is an application for the service. So all the services that are provided, they always cost you. हम कोई भी फैसिलिटीज लेते हैं तो हमें सर्विस फी देनी पड़ती है, चाहे हम नेट से रिजर्वेशन कराएं तो भी हमें सर्विस चार्ज देना पड़ता है, हम होटल में खाना खाने जाते हैं तो भी हमें सर्विस चार्ज देना पड़ता है. तो सर्विस चार्ज है तो वो सिस्टम सक्सीड करता है. सो इकोनॉमी इज अ वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट पार्ट. So location of the subscriber is decided by the HLR and VLR, home location register and the visitor location register. Home location register is when the subscriber is in the parent cell. The home location register knows all the information of the subscriber. But when it moves from one location to another, parent cell to the different cell, different city, different continent, then VLR, that the visitor location register, gives a temporary ID number to the visitor, and this temporary ID number is then communicated to the HLR of the parent cell. So even when you are in Indore or in Bhopal or in Delhi or in London, whenever your phone number is called, your MSC will know where you are and the call will be diverted to you. And at the same time, charge of your call will be to your phone number only wherever you are, depending upon the type of facilities you are using. So this is how second generation improved from first generation. It extended the region to a global scenario. Can anyone suggest why this need of second generation came into picture, or what it is commonly known as? Very common term for the 2G system is. अरे मैं टीचर हूं ना यार, मैं बिना क्वेश्चन पूछे रह ही नहीं सकती, आप जवाब दो या ना दो। ठीक है, तो that is the drawback of online system. Teachers like me, when they do not get the answer, they get demotivated. So this is very commonly known as GSM, Global System for Mobile Communication. This evolved in Europe after the European Union, after the formation of European Union. When they had the similar currency, euro, when they have similar trade rules, when they have everything brought to a common platform for the convenience of the trade, and they have the same visa, Schengen visa, which gives them permission to visit to different countries in the European Union. So they needed a common mobile system which they can use throughout the Europe, even when they are in Germany or France or Italy or whichever country they are. So this GSM system was evolved in 2.5 generation. This GSM system has two frequency bands. Earlier we just saw that in one generation, first generation, there was only one frequency band, 894. But here there are two GSM bands, 900 and 1800, GSM 900 and GCS 1800. So these two sub-bands, they are having two sub-bands of 25 megahertz, and each sub-band is having 124 radio carriers. That means 819 to 915 megahertz will have 124 radio carriers, and 935 to 960 megahertz will have another 124 radio carriers. These radio carriers are of 200 kilohertz. In first generation, only frequency channels were there which are using FM for communication. But in GSM, because the number of subscriber has increased and the number of subscriber have increased globally, so these carriers are then subdivided into time frames. So GSM system use both FDM as well as TDM. So one frequency carrier having 124 radio carriers, 124 radio carriers, each carrier is divided into 8 time slots. So during one time slot, one subscriber will communicate. So 8 subscriber can communicate simultaneously on one single radio carrier. So you have increased the capacity of the subscriber 8 times. Similarly, DCS 1800, which is more popular in US, it is having 75 megahertz of band, 17100 to 1785 megahertz, and 1805 to 1880 megahertz. This also has 124 radio carriers of 200 kilohertz each. So the 2G system, if we summarize, is having both TDMA as well as FM, and this is using circuit switching and CDM. In FM, only analog voice communication was possible, but in 2G, digital voice system is possible. Now the signal is digital, that means data can also be transmitted. So if you remember, in 2G modem, we used to connect modem to our telephone lines, which converts the analog signal into digital, and then we can transmit the text messages and videos and all. 2G system further extended to include the web browsing, and handphones are also modified. Some handphones started having camera. This has also improved the data rate from 2.2 kbps to 9.6 kbps to 64 kbps. So with the advancement in the technology, system is continuously improving. Now comes the third generation. In third generation, if you remember, I have used this word radio access network. This radio access network in 1G was only mobile station and base station. In 2G, it was mobile station, base BTS and BSC. In third generation, it is now node 1. No BTS, no BSC, it is now node 1. Mobile stations, they communicate to the nodes, and these nodes are then connected to RNC, that is the radio network controller. These radio network controllers then communicate to the core network. The difference from second generation to third generation architecture is only in the RAN. CN, that is the core network, remains the same because it is still having use of MSC and GMSC, MSC and gateway MSCs. Now, these MSCs are then connected to other circuit switches networks and the IP networks. This node 1 is the part of UTREN. UTREN is Universal Terrestrial Radio Access Network. It has more control as compared to the base station in the radio management network. In 3G, radio access network is changed from 2G. So we have node B instead of BTS. Now, so if we summarize, that 3G system is having CDMA, that is the UMTS WCDMA with packet switching and circuit switching. Now WLAN and WMAN can also be implemented. It has broadband digital systems. Phones are now even smarter with increase in the bandwidth. Web-based applications such as email is also possible. Audio, video files, text files, they can be uploaded and downloaded with a data rate up to 10 Mbps. But the change or the challenge is infrastructure for the 3G. In 2G, we were using analog as well as digital system, but now we are using CDM. Next generation is the fourth generation. Here the radio access network, which is changed in the third generation. Instead of base stations, we are using now node. So here it is E node. E node is evolutionary node B. The fourth generation major change in the core network. Whole core network is now changed. There is no MSC, there is no DC MSC. This is a 4G LTE. आपके मोबाइल फोन में भी आप देखिएगा कॉर्नर में राइट ऊपर LTE लिखा है, long term evaluation. So user equipment is then connected to E node B, evolutionary node B, same as that of 3G. But the major change that is in core network, that is instead of MSC, it is MME. Instead of HLR, it is having HSS. And these are then connected to serving gateways and PDN to connect to the other type of network. This is EUTREN. EUTREN is Evolved Universal Terrestrial Radio Access Network. And this is Enhanced Packet Core, which is as compared to the core network.
Madam, your slide is not moving actually.
I am at the 4G LTE architecture. Is it visible?
But this is showing 3G network architecture. Yeah, this is now visible.
Okay. So here is a slide which shows the difference in generations in network architecture. If you see the second generation to 2.5 generation, that is the GSM, mobile subscribers, there were handheld handsets with keypad only, which are connected to BTS and BSC, and these are then connected to MSC, HLR, VLR, and other gateway MSCs. In third generation to 3.5 generation, BTS and BSC are changed to Node B and RNC. But the core network is almost same. It is having MSC, it is having VLR, it is having SGSN, and so on. But in fourth generation, if you see, Node B is modified or advanced to E Node B, that is evolved Node B. U-Tren is modified to E-U-Tren so that it is compatible to the modified core network, which is now having MME in place of MSC, which is now having HSS in place of HLR, and SGW and PCR. So this is how the generations have changed. In 4G, advanced mobile access technology uses LTE, long-term evaluation, or LTE advanced. Now, it is not just the TDMA or FDMA we are talking about. Now we are talking about the voice over internet. So it is able to cater voice, text, video, multimedia, online games, online TV, that is the OTT, HDTV, with support to global mobility, integrated wireless solutions, customized personal services at very high data rate up to 100 Mbps. If you look at the spectrum allocation, you will see that in the lower band, less than 1 gigahertz, 2G, 3G, 4G, and 5G all exist. But as you move from low band to higher mid bands, which provides not only the increase in the frequency band, but this provides the coverage and more capacity. So it includes only 4G and 5G. Further increase in the high band, that is the millimeter wave, as the last lecture told by the Mitra madam, that now more faster speed over a very short distance is possible because of millimeter wave use, that is the high band spectrum. So that means all the designing and planning of 5G network will be changing. So in 5G network, 3 bands are used: low band, which is for the coverage, mid band, which is for the capacity, and high band, which is for the high speed communication between the subscribers. So the key architectural difference between 4G and 5G, if we look at, in 4G we were using evaluationary node B, which are connected to centralized core network, but the RAN is decentralized because there are different E nodes. But in case of 5G, not only RAN is decentralized, core is decentralized, and RAN is centralized. So DU, that is the digital units, are connected to edge clouds, and these are then connected to router or CN control. This is a 5G network architecture where you can see the UE is connected to, that is, a user equipment is connected to access and management or the mobility function, AMF. This AMF authenticates using AUSF. This AMF then identifies the unified data function, which is going to be used by the UE, which policy it has accepted, UE has accepted, that is verified with the policy control function, and then session is established between the calling and the called UE using session management function. Session between UE and the data network is established using user plane function. That is that establishes the PDU, that the protocol data unit session between the UE and the calling UE and the called UE. Now, the biggest difference between all these generations is that if you remember, in first generation, in second generation, in third generation, frequency bands
Sorry
of
to interrupt,
fixed-
ma'am. Can we also have one more speaker with us? Can you please sum up
Yeah,
your
sure.
talk? Okay.
Okay. So what I was saying is that frequency bands that were allocated are of fixed nature. But in 5G, network slicing is possible. Different on the same RAN, on the same OC, different slices of networks are possible, which help in implementation of massive MIMO. Different bands are allocated, as you have seen, lower band, middle band, and the higher band for high speed, mid band for coverage and capacity. So network slicing is possible in 5G, which made it more attractive. So the challenges in 5G is to build the infrastructure in millimeter wave, complete the wireless communication that is supported by WWW, and HD quality multimedia, faster, larger memory, and lower battery consumption. But the journey is still not come to the conclusion. 6G system is also started in working in Finland. A lot of research is going on, and Indian industry Reliance had a tie-up with 6G in Finland, and they are soon going to launch 6G services in India as well. Thank you very much. Hope you enjoyed the session.
Thank you very much, madam, for sharing your profound knowledge with us. One question in chat box. What is the importance of orthogonal frequency division multiple access and NOMA in case of 5G communication?
Well, as you see, in 5G, the capacity has increased a lot, but the band is limited. So OFDM provides a non-interference frequency band allocations to different subscribers. And at the same time, we are using subscriber with lot of variety of the applications, which can be implemented using massive MIMOs, and this helped in utilization of the frequency. OFDM has helped in utilization of the frequencies in different ways. If suppose in higher frequency band, you need high speed, whereas in the certain lower frequency band, you need more coverage than the speed. So OFDM helped in satisfying the need of all the subscribers.
Thank you so much, madam. Now, once again, I request Professor Patra, sir, please start your session. I hope connectivity issue is resolved. Professor Patra.
Yeah. Okay. The connectivity issue is resolved. I think the famous Murphy goes, if something has to go wrong, it will go wrong by all means. And that's what unfortunately happened today. I hope things go better now. Let me start my presentation and open the screens, share my screen.
Your screen is visible now.
Okay, that's great.
Just share your PPT, sir.
Yeah.
Your PPT is visible.
Okay, that's great. I think technology is finally working for us. Yeah. I thought of a talk which is on 5G, and it's more of a generalized talk which tells, which informs about different features that would come in. And my talk would be quite a bit overlap into the last talk, but not truly overlap, but yes, there will be something augmented and something going as more fundamental. And I have termed my talk presentation as 5G and GBPS for everyone. And I would consider it as a telecom revolution, which would be coming up. Of course, every generation has been a revolution in the world, and we have moved from 20s to 90s, in the 90s, age of 90s, to next millennium, and we're already reaching the quarter of this current millennium. This is broadly my talk outline, but I think I'll squeeze it in the right time. As I had started, currently, if you look at the number of mobile users in the country and the world is about 8 billion mobile users, and India is about 1.2 billion. Pretty big number. India has about 1/5 through 1/6 of world mobile usage. China had larger than India. India comes second in terms of mobile user density, not density, rather user population, next to China. Of course, the population is a major factor, and technology becoming affordable. Everyone is connected on mobile network, and that is what helps people to get empowered. And one thing that has happened over the past few years or few decades, I would say, the mobile communication as such started in beginning of 90s or in the middle of 90s. And over the last 35 years, the communication has moved from voice to data. Initially, communication technologies were developed or designed to cater to voice networks. In fact, if you look at 80s, everything looked at voice. Voice was the de facto communication standard. But then when people started to need data, the 2.5G brought in data into a voice channel. So the network is designed for voice, but then the data became a subpart of it. Now, look at the spectrum and how the spectrum is being used over the last multiple years. When I was in my college and undergraduate student, the lower band of the frequencies were being very popular. In fact, the maritime radio has been used for ages, even from last 2 centuries or roughly 1.5 centuries old. Maritime radio has been also being used. Then the commercial AM and FM radios came in late, and they all worked on slightly higher frequencies. The high frequencies were short waves, which worked around 25 meter of wavelength, few megahertz of frequency band. 90s saw the 80s rather in India, and many of the worldwide, it started a little earlier, television transmission. And the television transmission worked in VHF band, which was hundreds of megahertz, and gradually it moved to UHF band, going up to few gigahertz or the lower band of the gigahertz spectrum. The wireless mobile as such, the cellular mobile, started in 90s. It started with 800 megahertz band initially, or 900 megahertz band initially, and it was analog, completely analog in the first generation, then moved to second generation, which was again analog. And then when the 2G came, it was called GSM. And personally, I have used 2G, and I have seen the end of 1G. Now, 1990s, I was in UK when working on my project, on my PhD work, and at that time, 1G phones started to become very, very cheap. And why it became cheap was the world was moving towards a 2G system, and then the 1G phones, 1G system was going to be scrapped. But the similarity between 1G and 2G was they both were designed for voice, but 2G worked on digital technology, whereas 1G worked on analog technology. The 2G, which worked on digital technology, took voice as the main payload on it, converted it to data, and then transmitted. So the requirements were only for voice. But later on, as time passed by, there is a demand for data transmission through these networks. People wanted to send SMS, people wanted to send small messages, people wanted different applications. So at that time, what happens, the 2G created a new sub-evolution, which was called 2.5G. And what 2.5G did was, it provided data on an analog 2G system. Now, remember, the 2G system was designed digitally, but the payload was analog voice only. And 2.5G brought in a scheme where data could be sent over 2G networks. Now, beginning of 2000s, this millennium saw the advent of 3G, and 3G started to look at this whole system changed from analog to digital. Everybody looked at digital as the technology, data being the main criteria for transmission. But then the charges were designed more suitably. They were higher at that point of time. 4G came in India, at least we have seen it around 2015, 2014, when Reliance brought in the 4G revolution. Now, currently everybody, a large population does it. And because of that pressure of one industry bringing in 4G, brought in the other industries to also use 4G. And there have been very limited users or very limited service providers in terms of 4G evolution. Now, what we are seeing next is the 5G. Now, in 5G, different work have started. Now, initially, if you look at the development of a technology, what happens is you start with different releases, but then you start with designing test beds to test your product, create prototype of products. Once the products are designed, do a trial on those. And once the trials get successful, start with commercialization. If you look at today's market, you get a few number of telephones or mobile handsets which are 5G ready, and there are some which are 5G operational as well, even though the commercial services are not available. So these companies have started to look at the future and then created products that would cater to the future. Remember, technology changes bring in a lot of commercial values, and this is one reason why companies have started to invest in the new technologies. Now, what is it we are looking at from a 5G from feature point of view? Now, one thing that you find today is, if I need to transfer 1 gigabyte of data, it's thinkable. It will take me a couple of minutes, but I can download it. 10 years back, maybe in beginning of 2020s or in the, I would say in the beginning of 2010, 2010, 2011, 2012, transferring gigabits of data was impossible. In the same way, when we used our first mobile phones, which were 2G phones, or first 3G phones, which were having a graphical interface, downloading a small file of about 1 megabyte size used to take hours. This is how the technology changed. Now, today what we are looking at is a method by which we can attain gigabit speeds of data. Not only that, the data transfer would be thousands of times higher than what it was a few years back. Not only that, as the number of mobile connections are increasing, with 5G, we are expecting that the number of devices connected to the 5G network would go up. Why? Everything that we have and everything that we use, almost everything, would get connected to the network. Whether our house, car, washing machine, television, freezer, fridge, microwave oven, any gadget you think of, it will be connected to the internet, and this gets connected to the internet through a 5G network. Some of it we have already started to experience today. What do we experience today is GPS being available inside cars. What we experience today is televisions connected on connected through the internet, and we are able to get digital channels directly without subscribing to a satellite television channel. So these things have already come in, but then these will be coming up in much stronger ways. With 5G, we are also looking at, the future is looking at providing gigabits, tens of gigabits of speed at end user. That means at our home, we will be able to receive data at the rate of tens of gigabits per second. And not only that, when you have a high-speed data, you need the latency to be low, where the time between starting at communication and communication getting established and downloading starting need to be low. So that's another point. then when you have more data to transmit and more data to receive, they would consume more power, because the rate of transmission of data is increasing exponentially. The volume of transmission of data is increasing exponentially. As the volume of data transmission increases exponentially, the amount of energy you require to transmit the data is also increasing. Thereby, the current television, the current mobile devices would need different technologies in terms of their energy. And the energy has to come from battery source, because the devices are to be portable. Now, when this happens, we are going to see a mind-boggling change in the battery technology, and we could expect the batteries becoming at least 10 times more powerful. In fact, many of you would have observed over the last maybe 3 to 4 years, the battery capacities have gone up by about 50 to 60%. Earlier, we used to get batteries which were about 2000, 2500 milliampere hour. Then about 5 years back, we were getting things about 3000 milliampere hour. Today, the entry-level mobile phone batteries have started to move towards 4000 to 5000 milliampere hour capacity. So with that, what happens? Different things will happen. Video information would dominate the world traffic, and this information would be taking a lot of data. Remember, the video information takes data in two directions. One is, as the data availability or as the bandwidth availability improves, the videos become higher resolution, faster refresh rate, thereby the demand for quality video enhances. Thereby, the video is going to be the major consumer of the data traffic, internet traffic within a few years. Earlier, it used to be voice. With that, what we are going to get is HD audio and HD video. And current data uses a lot of HD audio, but video we get much less. But yes, it has already started. The trend is already on. The mobile phones and the mobile devices will be highly mobile. What it means, gradually as we see, we'll be connected to internet, whether we are going in a car, traveling in a train, traveling in a plane, or anything like that. And all this will happen with high speed condition, which would increase the communication challenges. And when we start with a high speed and higher data rates and all that, the latency has to go down. Thereby, the experience to the end user has to improve. A few things that would come up very soon would be things like operations from a remote place. Then things like gaming businesses, these will come up very, very strongly. Gaming would improve people at multiple locations, gaming on the same platform. So it will require a high amount of data, and this will also require strong or high bandwidth data because of the high resolution. And all these have been possible due to the engineering society which has created the technology. And what they have done, or what are the things that has made it possible? One is signal processing is one aspect. But again, with technology and processing, we are reaching a saturation as far as the signal processing can be done. And high data rate we want to achieve, and the data rate has to improve with the available bandwidth that we have. Now, if I use the 4 gigahertz, 6 gigahertz, or 8 gigahertz bands, these bands are much lower in frequency. Thereby, the amount of bandwidth they can supply or they can provision is very, very less. Now, when the data increases and every device starts to use data, we are going to consume a lot of power in terms of data communication. So we need to world has to fulfill some amount of green objectives, whereby you want to reduce the power consumption, or the world is working towards reducing the power consumption. And this power consumption reduction has to be done without loss of quality of service, and by improving the signal to noise ratio and data rate. Constantly, we are striving to provide higher data rate or receive higher data rate, improve the communication quality, but then try to consume less power, because with the increase in the number of devices, the power consumption is also increasing considerably. Now, some people in the group, those who are interested to work on these directions, some of the directions include device-centric architecture, where the cells are becoming small and small, and gradually the cell concept is vanishing. So with that, how the device would be designed is a challenge, and that's an area which is open for research. Coming to the communication technique, the communication has been now going into massive MIMO, and massive MIMO, how do you process the signal and how are you able to achieve the reception and transmission is a challenge. And Madam Debjani has spoken on this topic very lucidly and in a good depth. The other things that would come up is millimeter wave communication, because as we want higher and higher bandwidth to be achieved, we want high frequency carriers to achieve higher bandwidth and higher data rates. So when we go to high frequency, the bandwidth, the wavelength of the signal comes low, and gradually we are moving towards millimeter wave communication. Remember, as we move to millimeter wave communication, new challenges come up, because every device starts to radiate a lot of energy, and restricting the radiation and designing the devices is a challenge. Now, there was a time when designing devices at or designing transistors at micrometer level was a challenge, but today engineers have brought in transistors which are working at couple of nanometer range, below 10 nanometer range. So the solid state device fabrication technology has gone considerably high. In fact, there was a time when people thought, how do you reach the nanometer device size fabrication? Today we have reached that. But then what next? With the Moore's law statement, looking at the Moore's law statement, the world has been technologically moving with that concept, and the engineers have been able to create technology following that. Now, up to what extent would that be followed, and when that would stop is something to be seen. Now, when we move to these new 5G technologies, they will become more of device-centric than with cellular network. In the current network system, we have cells, and each cell has a fixed geographical boundary. But with the new technique, this geographical boundary will now change or transform into large number of transmitters and receivers, and every transmitter receiver will be connected to a central processing unit. Thereby, the amount of data that could be handled within a geographical location can multiply considerably. Again, one of the technologies that is being used to improve the data communication facilities in terms of end device able to provide large quantity of data, and the base station side or the central facilities about to support the data is through what is massive MIMO, and it is the antenna design which has been very important. One is processing of the signal, other is the design of the antenna. What we are going to achieve is antennas, and antennas are not going to be simple. They are going to be complex structures where each antenna is an array of thousands of antennas, thereby supporting a large number of users. This is one technology which is going to change, or which has been changing, and it is going to support or help us to go into large amount of data supports. Looking at the millimeter wave operation, we are moving from 4 and 6 gigahertz band. We are gradually moving towards 100 gigahertz band. Now, when we move towards 100 gigahertz band or tens of gigahertz band, the wavelength becomes low. When the wavelength becomes low, fabrication of the chips is difficult. Fabrication of ICs is tough. Fabrication of mobile phones is tough. Design of antenna is another one. So multiple areas of research are coming up. Thereby, a lot of work is being done in the world, and this has opened up scope for engineers, or more importantly, communication engineers considerably. Looking at today's point or today's world, if we look between 10 gigahertz to 1000 gigahertz, and if we see the way in which the signal attenuation changes with kilometer per kilometer when we do a free space communication, this is how it happens. As we move towards higher and higher in frequency, the signal attenuation keeps on increasing. Again, it's not a linear increase in the attenuation. there are dips and there are drops. Now, these bottom points are the points where the frequency points which are of interest to the engineering community, because all research and developments can come up in those frequency bands. Remember, this characteristic that comes in is because of the atmospheric limitations, not because of technological limitation. The atmosphere poses this as a obstruction to the technology development. So with time and technologists, when the engineers develop their technology, they'll be looking at all these points which could be used or which will be used for designing and using high frequencies for wireless communication and mobile communication applications. The other side of the story is the devices are going to get smarter. Now, not only that, today in our house, we would have a television which is connected to the internet and mobile phones connected to internet. But very soon what has happened, some trend has already started to happen also. What we have seen today, mobile phones are connected to internet. Televisions have already been connected to internet. Audio systems have already got connected to internet. But what we are going to see, every other gadget that we have at our home would start to get connected to internet. Our house security will be connected to internet. The car that we drive would be connected to internet. Mobile phones are in any case there. We have printers that are already connected to internet. You would have lamps which would get connected to internet. In fact, there are technologies where the lamp will, the light available in the lamp will work as a transmitter for visible light communication, and it will establish link between devices. Washing machines, microwave ovens, refrigerators, telephones, air conditioning, anything you think of, beds in the house, anything you think of in the home would be connected to the internet gradually. They would be generating data, transmitting data, receiving data, and consuming data. And when this happens, and we are moving towards what are called smart cities, there will be some computation taking up at the edge. So computer scientists are working on edge computing technologies. Again, when you look at factories that produce, that manufacture, those things will change. The highways will change with the automated car, electric car, and when they have communication gadgets installed on them. So gradually we're moving towards a technological revolution in terms of mobile communication and cellular networks. And what we are looking at in 5G is machine-machine type communication. That means today our major consumption is human consumption, where one could speak to somebody or use a data or use a video. A time will come when we don't need an intervention, but still data communication has to take place, where every parameter of the human body goes to a hospital continuously to detect if there is an anomaly. Every electrical gadget I have is connected to the internet to find out whether it is working correctly. These technologies are going to change the way in which we live, the way in which the data is transmitted, and the way in which the data communication will take place. Something to cheer for India. We had seen this news a few weeks back, maybe 2-3 weeks back or 4 weeks back, where the Minister for Communications, Ashwini Vaishnav, he successfully the IIT Madras had successfully shown the test bed for 5G calls. And India has started to work towards technology development for base stations. Earlier, we were importing all base stations, but gradually now we are working towards designing base stations which could work for the masses. Before that, IIT Kanpur had developed a baseband unit for the 5G NR baseband station. So we are behind, but certainly not far behind. We are having our impressions being shown, and we are working towards it. Of course, how much of it goes into a technology development and implemented and commercialization is a different issue. So that's all from my side. I'd like to thank my students Satyendra and Varun for helping me to prepare this presentation. And that's all. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir, for your words of wisdom. I want to ask one question, sir.
Yeah.
What is the importance of hybrid beamforming in case of 5G communication?
Beamforming has to be there because gradually when we move towards higher and higher data rate, one has to use all sorts of technologies available so that communication can take place. Now, beamforming helps you to basically channelize the beam in one direction. Thereby, with the same frequency, we are able to use it multiple locations in the same place. So beamforming will be used and it has to be there.
Thank you
Yes.
so much. Thank you so much.
Okay.
I now request Professor Dr. Ashutosh Shukla sir to conclude this session. Over to you, sir. Dr. Ashutosh Shukla sir. I request Professor Dr. Ashutosh Shukla sir to conclude this session.
Shukla ji, you are on mute.
Thanks, sir. I am highly thankful to all honorable speakers for such a delightful talk because everyone is switching towards 5G and beyond. Dr. Mitra Madam has given us a very in-depth knowledge of plan of 5G and beyond, especially the approaches and why and we use massive MIMO. Secondly, Dr. Patra sir, he has given us on his talk on the topic GBPS for everyone, the telecom revolution, and also he has given us he has enlightened us this miraculous revolution through various spectrums, and also he has given us a few research directions. Lastly, Madam has talked about the mobile system, that is the journey of 1G to 5G. Very in-depth knowledge. So I think all these our session, that is all these talks of our honorable members will be very fruitful for us and also for our listeners or research scholars. Thanks, sir.
Thank you, sir. It's my privilege to propose words of thanks to all who help us in making this session a successful talk. I want to express my gratitude to our speaker, Dr. Sarath Kumar Patra sir, Professor IIIT Vadodara, Dr. Devjani Mitra Madam, Professor IIT Dhanbad, and Dr. Jyoti Singhe Madam, Professor MANIT Bhopal, for sharing your important knowledge with us. I extend my sincere thanks to Professor Dr. Santosh Dhar Madam, Professor Dr. Ashutosh Shukla sir, Professor Dr. Namit Gupta sir, Director SVITS, and coordinating team of SVV for their guidance and inspiration. I am very grateful to Dr. Upinder Dhar sir, Honorable Vice Chancellor, Shri Vaishnav Vidyapith Vishwavidyalaya, Indore, who gave us the opportunity to organize this conference. I also offer my sincere thanks to all my colleagues, participants for being with us. Thank you all. Have a nice day. Thank you so much. Thank you.